Most people focus on the moment a policy is created, the board approval, the executive sign-off, the regulatory submission, the official rollout email, but the real story doesn't start there. It starts the day after. Today, we're looking at what really happens after a policy is created. When attention fades, implementation begins, and long-term governance consequences quietly take shape. Because writing a policy is easy. Living with it, that's where governance actually begins. Let's start with the moment everyone remembers. When a new policy is created, it often feels like progress. There's structure, clarity, alignment, control. Maybe it followed a risk event. Maybe a regulator requested it. Maybe leadership wanted stronger oversight. At the time, the decision makes sense. It feels responsible. The assumptions in that moment are usually, this will reduce risk, this will create clarity, people will follow it, it will fix what needs fixing. Once written, the problem is solved. And to be fair, those assumptions aren't irrational. At the time, this decision made sense. But policy creation is not the end of governance, it's the beginning of operational reality. The day after, things still look fine. The policy exists, it's documented, it's approved, it's uploaded to the intranet. Maybe there's training, maybe there's a communication email. Short term, everything feels calm. In fact, there's often a sense of reassurance. We've addressed the issue, we're compliant now, we've strengthened controls. Auditors see documentation, regulators see structure, leadership sees action, and nothing appears broken. This is the comfort phase. But documentation and behavior are not the same thing, and that distinction becomes visible only later. This is where the invisible shifts begin. After policy creation, subtle behavioral changes start to happen. Not dramatic ones, small ones. Managers begin interpreting clauses differently, teams adjust processes to fit the wording, operational shortcuts emerge, exceptions become informal norms, new pressures appear, increased reporting burden, slower approvals, more sign-offs, additional oversight steps. People don't usually resist policies openly, they adapt around them. This is where small compromises begin. Just this once. This situation is slightly different. We'll update the documentation later. Early trade-offs appear, efficiency versus compliance, flexibility versus control, speed versus governance. None of this looks dangerous, but this is the core governance moment, because policies don't fail loudly, they drift quietly. The consequences don't arrive loudly, they arrive slowly. Months later, something feels sudden, a control failure, a compliance breach, an audit finding, a regulatory question, a risk event, and leadership asks, how did this happen? But nothing broke overnight. The drift began the day after policy creation. Delayed effects compound. Unmonitored exceptions multiply, responsibilities blur, accountability weakens, documentation diverges from practice. What feels sudden is often the result of small misalignments accumulating. Policies don't collapse. They decay, and decay is rarely dramatic. It's gradual. Most people don't ignore problems, they simply don't see them yet. There are human reasons for this. Cognitive bias. Once a policy is approved, people assume the risk is controlled. Overconfidence. If it's written down, it must be managed. Process blindness. Teams focus on execution, not drift. Emotional investment. Leadership wants the initiative to succeed. Organizational inertia. Revisiting a policy feels like admitting something was flawed. Governance failure is rarely caused by incompetence. It's caused by normal human behavior operating in complex systems. That's why empathy matters, because everyone involved likely acted rationally at every step. People with experience don't judge policies by the moment they're approved. They judge them by what happens next. Experienced governance professionals ask different questions. How will this policy change behavior? What friction will it introduce? Where will people seek shortcuts? Who owns monitoring? What signals indicate drift? When will we review it again? They don't just track compliance, they monitor alignment between documentation and reality. They expect behavior to change, and they plan for that change. They anticipate exceptions, they define review cycles, they build feedback loops. They understand that policy creation is not a governance achievement, sustained oversight is. That mindset changes everything. The lesson isn't don't create policies. The lesson is plan for the day after. Here's the mindset shift. A policy is not a solution. It's a hypothesis about behavior. The framing principle. Every policy should include a built-in review mechanism, and one long-term question every board, executive, or compliance leader should ask. What will this look like 12 months from now in real operational behavior? If you can answer that clearly, you're not just creating policy. You're practicing governance. Most governance failures don't happen at the moment a policy is written. They happen in the months that follow, when behavior drifts, monitoring weakens, and assumptions go unchallenged. If this changed how you think about policy creation, that's the goal. This is the day after, and next week we'll explore what happens after a regulatory audit.